Are you ready to be unmessable with? Well, you are in the right place. Welcome to Be Unmessable With, the podcast where you get the inspiration, strategy, and coaching to be unmessable with, no matter what life throws at you. And now, your host, Jocelyn Herman-Saccio.
Hey there, welcome to Be Unmessable With, the podcast. I'm Jocelyn Herman-Saccio, your host. And my next guest, for more than 20 years, has powerfully mentored tens of thousands of women in business to have them grow and scale their businesses, earning tens of millions of dollars collectively each year. And they work less and enjoy life more. That's the most important thing. It's not just about scaling up the dollars, but working less and enjoying life more. That's priceless. Her leveraged business methodology is based on her 15 years, generating multiple seven figures annually, taking 14 weeks of unplugged vacations each year. And her book, The Leveraged Business, How You Can Go From Overwhelmed at Six Figures to Seven Figures and Get Your Life Back, is the new definitive roadmap on how she's done it with heart and how you can too, without sacrificing your life. I am proud to say that she is a friend and a colleague, and I am thrilled that she said yes to being on Be Unmessable With the podcast. So let's welcome Fabienne Fredrickson. Welcome, Fabienne.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here, although it's so weird because we're both in Paris and we're like right across town from each other. We just realized, it's like, where are you? Oh, where are you? We could have met for coffee and done this on the street. Yes, next time. Yes. So, that was a very brief introduction, but I'd love to give you a chance to kind of fill in the gaps for people and let them know a little bit about how you ended up doing what you're doing, your journey, your story, however you want to tell us.
Yeah, I realized very early on, after 8 years in corporate in Manhattan, that I am, in fact, unemployable.
I love that. Actually, I never really thought about it. I think I'm unemployable too. I'm with you. Yes.
I think if you are unmessable with, you can't work in
exactly.
Else. And when I discovered that, I had to take a deep, scary leap of faith and leave corporate and open up my own practice, doing nutrition, holistic nutrition at the time.
Wow.
I know. And while I got some,
but that now makes sense. Your love of food and cooking. Now I just connected that. In
fact, this kind of ties in. I never talk about this, but when I didn't get clients right away. And so I was freaking out, every night, the 3 a.m., I don't have enough client sweats. And I started giving cooking classes, get started in the kitchen cooking classes on my Pullman camping stove in my living room
in New York.
Yep, tiny apartment, 250 square foot apartment on 38th and Lex in New York. And it's just, I needed to figure out how to make money. And I remember calling my dad in the middle of the night because I was in New York, he was in Paris. And I said, Dad, this self-employed thing, I'm not sure I can make this happen. And I felt kind of like shame, just to have to call Dad at 3 a.m. And he said, if I know anything about you, Fabienne, is that when you want something and you want it badly enough, you're going to do whatever it takes to make it happen. So figure out how to get clients. And I was like, yes, wow, yes, of course, because there was no choice. It would have been a slow death going back to working for anybody else. So I'm going to make a really long story short and say, through trial and error, I created a client attraction system for myself. But what I noticed back then is everything I needed was not in one place. So I had to go here for networking and here for, figuring out your target audience and here for closing the sale and all that jazz. And also what I was learning from other people. Remember, this was 25 years ago. There weren't that many really successful feminine women in business doing multiple six figures or seven figures who had, kids at home and who were like a woman that I'd want to be friends with. And so everything I learned was like bro marketing, bro selling, bro networking, bro running your team. I love the guys, but I am not one. And I had to translate it into, how do you do business with heart? How do you do this so you feel authentic? Because when it's yucky, you don't want to do it. It feels like you're marketing, like you're beating somebody over the head with a 2x4 to get them to become clients. So all of that to say, I created this client attraction system, and I filled my own practice in 8 months from the time I created it um, to filling my practice. And other people started noticing and saying, "How did you do that?" And I'd say, "Well, let's have tea. I'll teach you." And it was so clear. People started hiring me, saying, "I know that you do holistic nutrition, but can I join your program? And instead of teaching me about, tofu and how to make brown rice that doesn't stick to the pot, can you teach me how to get clients, how to market myself, how to sell myself authentically?" And so I became a business coach, little Fabienne on the phone, and you get 30 minutes a week, and you get 30 minutes a week. And that practice became full. And then I started, it was full and full, and I would raise my prices, and it was still full. And I realized I wanted to make more money, but I had no more time. So I needed to leverage my time. We're going to talk a lot about leverage probably today. And the way that I could leverage my time was to leverage my intellectual property. And so I think you and I talked about this over coffee.
We did, yeah, or dinner or wine or something.
All of that. And so I started noticing that and the same thing had happened when I was a nutritionist. Almost everybody needed to eat less meat, less sugar, less dairy, fewer processed foods, and more whole grains, greens, all the things. And it was the same thing with my clients. I have this way of thinking about life. Like I notice things, connections. Literally almost every time I had a session with somebody, I was saying the same thing to different people all the time. And I started documenting what are the common denominators that I was telling people about, where virtually 100% of people needed this. And I created this client attraction system for others, started teaching it, started creating groups and boot camps, which eventually led to 3-day events and masterminds, and leading to what I teach, the leveraged business methodology, in a program called the Leveraged Business. And I eventually got to 7 figures 15, 16 years ago in my business with 3 little kids at home. I was like 2 at the time, and I was pregnant with my 3rd. And this is what I do now. I teach women how to make their own money, lots of it, but working less. So making at least twice as much, working half the time in a feminine way, working much less by using the 80-20 rule, by using leverage, and by mixing, because I'm half French, half American, mixing my American ambition with my French non-negotiable need for pleasure in my life, downtime, pleasure, unplugged vacations, and all of that. So I'm sure there's more to my story, but that's a good start.
But yes, that is a good start. And what brought you to France? So there you are in New York, you're teaching people this process. How did you end up here? I know you said your father was here, but how did you end up here?
So because I really believed in having it all, I still talk about having it all, whatever all means to you, which is different for everybody.
It is.
I had the big 10,000 square foot house. I had the yacht club. I had the people helping me in the kitchen, and a daily housekeeper, and the beach outside. We had it all. And there was this growing, I thought, once you have the money and you have all the things, the 4 cars, all that jazz, I thought I'd be happy. And I was, but something was missing. And I had previously thought that you just buy your way to happiness. We got caught up in that Joneses, keeping up with the Joneses thing. And then I really took a step back and said, what is it that I really love? What are my needs that are unmet?
Hmm.
What do I tolerate? If I really take a step back and say, what do I value? I realized I valued beauty. I valued simplicity. I valued the idea of being in Europe and traveling, and I had also never taught my children French. And so I said, we're gonna, talk to Derek. You know Derek, my husband,
Yes.
and we said we're gonna reverse engineer our life so that in 18 months, we hid this from everybody. In 18 months, we're going to spend 1 year in Paris. And it became, between the two of us secretly, all roads lead to Paris. So
Yeah.
what do we do with the team? What do we do with the hundreds of clients who would fly in 4 times a year to meet with me for our quarterly meetings? What do we do with the house? What do we do with the office in downtown Stamford? What the kids' schools? And we basically, every decision we made was through the viewpoint of, we're going to Paris in 18 months, in a year, in 6 months, in 3 months. And we did it,
Yeah.
Jocelyn. And when we got here, we're like, uh-oh. And you know this.
I do. You're preaching
Uh-oh.
to the choir. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 weeks in, we're like, shoot, we love it so much here. What are we going to do? Because we don't want to go back. I felt fulfilled here. I felt the slower pace of life. I felt that I love America. I love being American. But I felt like my soul belonged here in France. And for other people, it's other places, or, the mountains versus the sea. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter.
Hmm.
And then I gave myself permission to live the life that I wanted. And other people thought I was crazy. You have it all. Why do you need more? Or is it ever going to be enough for you? And I was like, wow, I'm a sensitive person. I was like, wow. But my view on life is, how good, I ask this of my clients all the time, how good will you allow yourself to have it?
Perfect question.
And where do you stop and why? And that, I think, is an unmessable with question, is, where do we let the opinions or criticism or lifestyles or values of others get in the way of what would actually make us happy?
Or
And I
even
think it's
our own limiting beliefs.
absolutely.
Like it's not possible, or I have to wait till I retire, I have to, or whatever those conversations are that we have with ourselves that we think are true, but they're nothing more than a belief that is limiting what's possible.
Yeah. So my father died a couple of years ago, but one of the things that I learned from him throughout my life, a couple things. The first thing he said he taught me was, well, you can do anything you want, so figure out how to do it. We already touched on that. The second is, when I would say I want something, and he's like, no, Fabienne. He goes, but I would say, oh, but Papa, it would give me pleasure. Which is a thing we say here, ça me ferait plaisir. When I said that, he would say, okay. Because here,
Well, then you got to have, here, pleasure is the name of the game. In the
yeah,
States, it's more, it'll give you money. Oh, okay,
yeah.
that's good.
So I just kept thinking, okay, but if this would give me pleasure, I'm going to do it. But also, what he taught me, he didn't say those words, but I spoke this at his funeral, his eulogy. I said, he taught me to get clear. Like, what do you really want? Reverse engineer.
Yep.
What do you need to do to make it happen? You're so much like this, Joss, too.
I know, this is how I work with people for
Yeah.
sure.
Get clear, reverse engineer, and get in gear. Like, make it happen. And it's a question of, heart. Like, get clear, reverse engineer is mind, and then get in gear is like just action. Go,
Your
go, go.
feet. Yes,
Move your feet.
exactly. Move your feet. I love it. And tell me a little bit more about leverage, because I do want to touch on that for people so that you can talk about what you mean by that and leveraging your time. And, because a lot of people listening are definitely entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs, or they're founders and CEOs already. And a lot of what people bump into, the people that I coach, I know bump into the limit of time. And, you and I have talked about this a lot. And if you're trading time for dollars, there's a cap. You're either going to raise your prices. I mean, at some point, that's it. You've got a certain amount of time. So talk to us about that so that people can begin to break up those limiting beliefs they have
Yeah.
about the structures that they inherited for the most part.
Yeah, so I've actually got to talk about masculine and feminine energy, and I don't mean man or woman. I mean masculine and feminine energy is to explain how I teach about leverage. We are we are in a culture that rewards the masculine more so than the feminine. I know I'm being bold saying this. My company is called Bold Heart. So
Bold heart, yes. So you're living true to your name.
Yeah. So what I mean by that is the masculine energy is really linear. It's about achievement, competition, action, like go, go, go. Where the feminine is more about resting and intuiting, and you know, lots of other things. But what I noticed is in our society, being busy is rewarded. Being busy and making money is rewarded. And from having worked with so many thousands of women, I've noticed that they're all incredibly busy working on the wrong things. And so if you were to take the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule and apply it to how busy we are, we would notice, and if you know the 80-20 rule, you understand that 80% of the things you do produce 20% of results. Conversely, 20% of the things you do produce 80% of results, give or take. Sometimes it's 90-10, all of that. But all of that to say, if you were to apply the 80-20 rule on a 10-hour day, 8 hours of each day, busyness produces 20% of results, like clients, money, growing your business. And 2 hours of your day produce 80% of your revenues. And when you start thinking about that, and especially we women, I know some men are listening to this too, but if we especially as women have been taught to people please and to put our own wants and needs behind the requests or obligations of others, I started really setting some boundaries and being like, why am I doing this? Is it because they asked? But why am I putting their needs before what I want for my business, my life? And I started saying no to a lot of things and really like taking a bird's eye view and saying, is this actually moving the needle forward? Then why did I spend 2 hours doing that? And why am I doing something that not only do I not like, I'm not good at, and I don't have time for it? And if I could just use that same time on something that would move the needle forward, I started saying no to 80% of things and noticed what is actually my unique brilliance. What are the things, we all have it, right? What are the things that I'm excellent at, uniquely brilliant at, passionate about, that actually move the needle forward versus the things that I'm competent at or totally incompetent at?
Yeah, I was going to say I have a long list of those things I'm incompetent at, but still did because I didn't have anybody else to do it until I did. But, and especially as women, I think, again, and my clientele is half-half. It's half women, half men. So, but I know you work primarily with women. But I noticed that with women, mostly they feel they have to do it all, which is very different than having it all. And it's like a natural proclivity to or a default mode of, okay, I'll handle it. Whatever it is. Yeah, I'll handle it. Yeah.
It kind of mimics what, even when we have a full-time job or a business, we're still culturally supposed to drop off the kids, pick them up, make their school
Do the
lunches,
grocery shopping, do the make sure the thing. I mean,
all of
Michael,
it.
who my husband,
Yeah.
we were just talking about this because I usually make the travel arrangements and book the hotels and and he booked a restaurant the other night and he was so happy, like he picked it and he booked it and it was like a whole, because usually I'll just handle all that stuff. And
Yeah.
he's developing his ability to take over a lot of those things for me while we're here.
Yeah, and culturally, we're supposed to. So that's like 3 or 4 full-time jobs. So culturally, we're taught that it's just our job, even if we
Yeah.
have a full-time job. And if we say no, that we're not a good girl, we're not a nice girl, and we're even a bitch. So, you know, until you start saying, wait, whose life am I living here? Am I living a life for myself or for everybody else? And I teach people how to elegantly set strong, firm boundaries, but with a smile, and take back your life. So if you start thinking, going back to how you use your day, you start reducing the time that you work on things that don't matter. So the first chapter of the Leveraged Business book is about leveraging your team and allowing yourself the gift of delegating to other people. Would you please do this for me? Would you please do this for me? And removing things from your plate that are in your competence and incompetence categories. Most people spend a crazy amount of time in their competence because they can do it, but frankly, somebody else could do it better. And when you reduce that, you start gaining more time. This happens within the first 3 months. When I work with somebody, they start gaining back around 2 to 3 hours a day. And within 6 months, they gain back around 5 or 6 hours a day. And instead of going to eat, bonbons and sitting on the sofa watching soap operas, what you do is you then start spending more time on your unique brilliance activities, the exponential growth activities. So instead of just 2 hours a day, you start spending 3 or 4 hours a day on those things that move the needle forward, that grow your business exponentially, that you are passionate about and love and would do for free all day long. Ironically, those are the things that you get paid the most for. And this idea of leverage, through leveraging your team, leveraging your systems, leveraging your intellectual property, leveraging your business model of working one to many, or automating all the things. There's a chapter in the book called Leverage Your Business Model. There are literally countless permutations of how you can deliver your work in the world without working so much. That's when you see your business grow and you start working less, and it grows some more, and you start making more, and it becomes this compound effect. It's really just science, and it works.
It does. It definitely does. And, for those of you listening, we'll talk about Fabienne's book at the end of the show because she's going to give you a gift at the end of the show, which you'll be very excited about. And I read your book and I thought it really got me thinking about so many things. And I know when we first met, a year or two ago, whatever it was, I was definitely working more than I am now. And I designed this year. So how I work with people is I ask them, okay, what's your vision? What do you want your life to look like a year from now, 5 years from now, whatever it is? And then what needs to happen if it's a year from now, what needs to happen 9 months from now? Create the milestones and backwards engineer the whole thing, create an action plan and all that, and then discover what messes with you in the process so that we can dismantle those messable with moments. And I designed for myself that I would work 10 hours a week. That was what I wanted and now I am, and I have space to do the podcast and the book and all the things that I was always like, oh, I have no space to do those. Someday. So someday disappears, everyone, when you start to utilize these methods that Fabienne is talking about and leverage your time, because there's so many things that I was doing that I could do. Doesn't mean I should do it. And I think that's a key thing that people, but I can do it. It's easier for me to do it than to have to train somebody, which is true in the short term. But from a sustainability perspective, you might spend 5 hours training somebody on something that would have taken you an hour to do, but then you don't have to do it again, then it's over, so I think that's something that I get a lot of complaints from the entrepreneurs that I work with saying, yeah, but it's just easier for me to do it. Yeah, well, you're looking at the short game.
Yeah, I was just talking about this on a Q&A with our members yesterday, how one of them said the exact same thing. 100% of people initially say this. But I told the story of how I brought on our first enrollment salesperson, if you want to call it that, 10, 12 years ago. I trained that person once. I created the checklist, the scripts, the standard operating procedure.
If they say this, what do you say? Like that kind of, yeah.
I created it 12 years ago, and we've had so many members of the team in the enrollment department ever since. And that was the only time I ever trained anybody, because then it became a thing, and it became a training manual that got updated along the way, but I never had to do anything. So did it take me a few days, perhaps a few weeks to zhuzh it? Yeah. But 12 years later, I haven't looked at it since. And that's what you want to do in every aspect of your business.
Every aspect, because when you create systems that are replicatable and reproducible, especially if you have video manuals on those systems, then anybody who comes into the job can watch those, can refer to them. They don't have to come to you with 15,000 questions. And, so people don't I think if you look at the planet, people are not organized inherently to think sustainably. If we just
gratification culture.
Yeah, it's that dopamine hit, it's that instant, kind of gratification. And I think even if you look at people's well-being, we're not really oriented around the sustainability of our body or our nutrition, just from a perspective of what we put in our bodies and what we do with our bodies all day long. Sitting in front of Zoom all day long is not sustainable. You cannot live a life on a computer all day long. And, so that's so important in the design of a life, of having it all, is to have recharge time and direct sunlight and all of those things that, you and I talk about and our colleagues talk about. But for those of you listening, that's important. It isn't about work, 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 work. What is a life for you that's full and fulfilling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do these retreats, as you know, in Provence called A Delicious Life, where mostly American women come and spend a week with me. And I just did one in this year in April. And there's a point at which in the afternoon we'd gone around Provence, like all these markets and villages in the morning, and we made a fantastic lunch, or maybe we went out, I don't remember. And I was like, okay, ladies, it's time for everybody to take a nap, and then we'll come back here and do some coaching at 6 p.m. before we have apéro. And one woman, when I saw her back at 6 o'clock, I was like, how was your nap? And she goes, I didn't nap. And I said, oh, you didn't? Why? She goes, I was just kind of shocked that you would say that we should all relax and take a nap, because I've just been taught to be so productive and that taking a nap is lazy. And I told her, I said, that this masculine energy of do all the time, if you don't replenish the oil lamp, you cannot shine. And that thing itself, she went back to Los Angeles and she's like, even if I don't take a nap now, I'm resting. I'm giving myself time to really enjoy my delicious life, as opposed to always going for the next thing and
producing the next result. But it's interesting, Fabienne, because I recently was talking to some of my 2 clients on one call, and I was talking about recharge time and do you schedule that in your day? And they were like, the problem is, it seems to me like that's another thing I have to do. Like self-care is now a task. So I said, okay, let's change the language around it, because language creates the reality that you live in. And I said, how about if you have unproductive time? And their brains couldn't handle being unproductive, but they said that actually seems really good. We're going to try unproductive time. So now I'm telling everybody to just schedule in some unproductive time and notice your addiction to producing results. Yep. It's just right there. It's like, okay, what can I get done right now? It's amazing. It is amazing. So now, given the show is called Be Unmessable With, I like to ask people a situation in your life where you were dealing with really difficult circumstances, something that messed with you and could have taken you down, right? Taken you out of the game of whatever game you were in, but you somehow rose above it. You somehow transcended the situation and came out what I call unmessable with. What comes to mind that you could share with people? It always helps people to hear those moments.
Yeah, I think of course there are millions of
Yeah.
little moments like that. I think to a time I can pinpoint to this one moment where I was overworking massively. I had just signed up. I had just brought on a coach to coach for me, and she betrayed me. She took my clients' testimonials and put them on her website.
Mm.
She stole clients from me, and so I fired her. And I ended up I had launched another 2 masterminds. So now I was working on 4 masterminds. Every client was getting a call a month with me. It was unbearable. I could not see straight because I had fired her, and I wasn't going to say to the clients, don't, I can't, we can't work with you anymore. And I just had a breakdown. And, and I don't, everyone was saying just get rid of those 2 mastermind groups. And it was really messing with me because I felt that that was not what I wanted to do. It was not in integrity. And I had to dig deep and really look at how am I messing up with myself? What is my mindset that's keeping me in this situation? People were saying, hire somebody else then. I'm like, oh no, I can't trust anybody because I will be betrayed again and again. And there was an intervention that happened. 3 people, including my husband, said, you have to either get rid of the masterminds or hire somebody.
Yeah.
And, I was crying, snot coming out of my nose, bright face. And finally, when I surrendered to my belief that all people that I will hire to coach for me will betray me, and I changed my belief system around that. Within 30 minutes, I found 2 coaches that ended up coming on board and working with me for 5+ years. And so it was the unmessable with part for me. It might be different for other people that you talk to, was about really digging into my values. My values said I cannot give up these people that I made a commitment to, dozens of people for 1 year. What needs to change within my mindset to be able to live my values and to do the right thing, but not to give up and sacrifice my life and well-being at the same time.
Yeah.
And it opened a door where I now still today, 12, 15 years later, I have all these coaches working with me to work with our wonderful members. But I felt like I was being messed with at the time, and I stuck with my values. I just needed to change my mindset and my beliefs that were unfounded. It's not because one person does something to you that everyone's going to do that to you.
But so many times, I mean, it's one of the top 10 hits of what messes with people are limiting beliefs, and those come from the past. Something happened, and then we make up something about it and believe it like it's the truth rather than it's something that happened. It doesn't mean that's going to happen again.
I want to tell you another story, may I?
Okay, yes, of course.
This one's kind of fun. So I had this former client who wanted to come back into the program, but she had a new husband, and her new husband was just not allowing her. Meanwhile, it was her business, not allowing her to come back into my program to grow it. And, they're dancing with us. She keeps reaching out and he keeps saying no. And finally I said, all right, I have an enrollment team, but let's call her Jane. I'll get back. Let me book a call with Jane, and I will talk to her, but make sure that her husband, will call him John. Make sure that John is also on the call. So they show up, and niceties, hey, Jane, great to see you again. Hey, John, nice to meet you. And he's like, like this really big personality guy. And I'm like, John, you know what I'm getting from you is I'm getting that you are a really accomplished guy. And he goes, yes, I am, feeling kind of happy, chuffed, as they would say in the UK. And I said, my observation is that you're probably always the smartest man in the room. And he goes, yeah, actually, I usually am. And I said, I admire that. And what I also know is that when it comes to taking women who are overwhelmed at six figures to seven figures with a delicious life, I am the smartest man in the room. And there was quiet. And he didn't know what to say. And by the end of the day, the contract for the 2-year program was signed. And it was me coming in and being like, okay, you're not only trying to mess with Jane, but you're messing with me. Like, stop getting in the way. And I got into my masculine to present this, stop getting in the way. And he did. And I kind of like telling that story because
that's a great story.
She grew her business and she felt like she could set more boundaries and take her power back. So that's
so critical. I love that. I love that story. So tell us what you want to leave people with and what people could start doing like right now to leverage their business.
I want you to think about what would having it all mean to you in your business and also in your personal life. And what are the things that you've been wanting to be, do, or have that maybe for the past 15 to 25 years you've been pushing down into the water like a beach ball, and you're getting tired of not living that, being that, having that, doing that. And imagine yourself actually going for it, turning up the volume on what you could have, and notice what resistance comes up, what beliefs, what fears, what rules you have, what is your self-image aligned with this, and write it all down. One of the things I do is if somebody's at six figures, I say, okay, imagine that we're going to go for seven figures or 7 figures and 8 figures. And they're at first they think, oh, it's such a great idea. And then I'm like, okay, so let's go for it. And they're like, oh no, I can't because of this. And I'm like, that's what we have to work on. And when you make a list of all the reasons why you can't do something, this is the gold. This is the way. The obstacle is the way, right? And you teach this so beautifully. The whole idea of you can have it all. You just need to get rid of all the false fears, all the false things that are in the way. You need to adjust your self-image to believe that you deserve and can have, and absolutely expect that to be your reality, and work on those beliefs. And then, it's the whole get clear, reverse engineer, get in gear. Let's make it
love
happen.
it. This year. Rhymes
This
with
year.
all your
I
gears.
love that.
Exactly. Add another ear,
If I may, I'm going to borrow that and add
you don't have to borrow it. It is a gift. Okay. Absolutely. And I know you have a gift for everybody listening. So what can we offer people?
Listen, if you are liking the idea of this leverage methodology I'm talking about, and you have a business, perhaps you're at six figures, I'm happy to gift you my book called The Leveraged Business, How You Can Go From Overwhelmed at Six Figures to 7 Figures with Your Life Back. You can go to boldheart.com, like the word bold and the word heart.com, and up at the top you'll see that there is a book, a free book. I just ask you to meet me halfway. I've written it. It took me 8 years to write it. I will print it. I will give it to you. Just meet me halfway by paying nominal shipping, and then it'll be to you within just a few days. If it's of interest, you can grab that book for free. I'm also, if you want to just spend some more time with me, you can find me on all the socials at Fabienne or Fabienne Fred. And then the podcast.
Exactly. I was going to say, what about the podcast? You got to tell them about the podcast.
Well, that's also an unmessable with moment. If I can just throw that in there as we wrap up, as I for years wanted to do. Okay, I'll do a Delicious Life podcast, or Delicious Life or Having It All podcast, and then of course I'll do a Leverage Business podcast. But the two cannot be together. And I just had a belief that no one wanted to hear about business and pleasure and spirituality and food and travel and parenting and all that jazz. And I finally just got over myself and created the Fabienne Show, a podcast where our lives are full of different things, and so the podcast is going to be about that. So if it speaks to you, you can find me on your podcast channels at the Fabienne Show.
And I remember when we were having dinner in the winter, we were talking about the name of your show, and you were debating whether to call it the Fabienne Show. So tell me, what finally flipped the switch to that?
That was a really big tear-filled moment, because I have a big personality. I have always been, in some people's eyes, too much, right? So as women, we're not enough, but we're too much. And where do you stand? And my whole life, people have been trying to calm me down and tell me, this isn't the Fabienne Show. Who are you, the Queen of Sheba? Don't let this be the Fabienne Show. And so for me, the Fabienne Show is something that I used to say all the time to my clients. I just want you to know, this is not the Fabienne Show. This is all about you. Really just really downplaying myself. And yet I'm asking my clients to be the fullest expression of who they are, and to take up more space and have a voice and a choice and be, just take up more space. And then somebody said to me, oh no, you should call it the Fabienne Show. And I burst into tears. I was like, there's no way in hell I will ever call it that. And I had to do all this mindset work. And it's actually part of my message is, when you think you should be quiet, do the opposite. Do the opposite of your resistance. And that's when everything is going to go your way. So I boldly, daringly am calling it the Fabienne Show.
And it's hosted by the Queen of Sheba.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. I'm so happy for you. And I'm so happy you said yes to being on the show. And, for those of you listening, if something resonated with you, if you learned something, which I can't imagine you didn't, but if you did, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast, but also share this episode. Share this episode with anybody in your life who has a business, who wants to scale it up, or who wants to start a business. Let them design it from the beginning in a way that's leveraging, rather than have to, end up in burnout or overwhelmed to then have to fix your systems. Design it from the get-go in a way that leverages your team, your time, your business strategies, your intellectual property, everything. Anything, final words, Fabienne?
Well, I just really appreciate the work that you have done in your career in the world, in service to so many thousands and thousands of people. Jocelyn, you are such an inspiration and such a force for good. And I'm just so grateful to have spent these moments with you and to call you my friend.
I feel exactly the same about you. So I'm so happy that we've met. Thank you, Jennifer Hill, for introducing us. And for everybody else, we'll see you on the next episode of Be Unmessable With, the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Be Unmessable With, the podcast. I always love that you spend a little time with us listening or watching this podcast, and I want to make sure that you get value every time you do. So I want to offer you a free 1-hour workshop on money. Does money mess with you? If you're a human being, then it likely does. At least every human being I've ever met, it messes with them to some degree. So it's not so much how much money you have, but your relationship to money. And we have a free 1-hour workshop that was co-led by myself, my good friend, media icon, Robin Quivers, and our wealth coach, Tyrone Jackson. So click below and you can have instant access to Unmessable with Money. Unleash your inner millionaire.